What is happening, everybody? It is Thursday, which means it's time for us to do a little bit of a DraftKings Reignmakers breakdown here. And whatever it is that you guys want to talk about here, this is a show for you guys. So if we want to talk about the Thursday night football game, we could hit on that, which, I don't know. Like, this could actually go multiple ways. Either people have no clue how to play the Thursday night football game, or it's such a terrible game that you guys have no interest in talking about it at all. That's definitely a possibility. We could talk about other primetime games. We could talk about the main slate on Sunday. Whatever it is you guys have questions about, throw it into the YouTube chat. We'll hit on that over the course of the show, and we'll use the different tools at stochastic.com to build some lineups and try to find the optimal players we want to be playing for Reignmakers purposes. And also lots of stuff coming out in Reignmakers. If you guys didn't see, there's information on year 2 of PGA and UFC Reignmakers. We just had the Octagon passes. Those dropped yesterday for the UFC. And there's also the RPO packs that are available right now in the drop. So if you guys want to get one of the RPO packs, it's only going to guarantee you 4 rares in those packs. So lots of stuff going on right now in the DraftKings Reignmakers streets. And right away, we've got Brandon in the chat has asked us, let's see, I'm popping the chat out here. Why are the questions going away? There we go. All right, we've got Brandon said, "Hi, Greg. Last time you said the Reignmakers projections were free, but I'm unauthorized to use them when he is logged into his account. And then also he would prefer that we talk about the main slate." I feel you, man. I feel you. So I'm not sure why that would be the case. They are free on the site, but it depends where you're looking. Go to where you should be looking to is projections, and then DraftKings Reignmakers NFL projections. They are supposed to be free, but I'll check. Maybe somebody accidentally changed something on the back end and put them behind a paywall. But do me a favor, check again and see if they show up there. If not, I'll reach out to the data team to figure out why they are not showing up for you. We also have not only for NFL, but we also have projections for PGA in here, as well as MMA. So if you guys look, let's see, where are the tools for the PGA Reignmakers? Because we have those as well that are free. But where'd they move to? I don't know. They were somewhere here, and then they just moved. So either way, Brandon said, yeah, that's where I'm trying to look at them. Maybe we changed something. They're supposed to be free. I'm going to, because I just noticed that some other stuff has moved around on the site as well. So I'll get back to you and figure out why that is the case, that they aren't showing up for you. But either way, we're looking at them on screen right here, and we'll break down the main slate, Thursday Night Football, which disaster of a Thursday Night Football game. I think probably the funniest thing about Thursday Night Football tonight is the total has been bet down to 30 the last time I had looked. And I make fun of Thursday Night Football for having low-scoring games all the time. But this is extreme, is it not? We have the total is now, 30.5 with the juice on the under for Steelers-Patriots. Aren't you almost inclined to just lean towards the over, just from a standpoint of the defenses are probably going to score touchdowns in this game? And also, for Reignmakers purposes, we'll get people who ask us about the defenses. You could play the same defense in the same lineup just by playing different players from that defense in the same lineup, where it's like you could play a cornerback, you could play a defensive lineman. And if it just so happens that the Patriots defense or the Steelers defense is the highest scoring player in the game, you could play them 4 times in the exact same lineup. And I kind of think that's an interesting way to approach this slate. But anyway, Brandon is asking another one there. Do we think that no QBs or no defense will be more contrarian? Let me look at our projections right here for Thursday. So we have the overall highest projected player in the game is Zeke at 14.1. Trubisky projected for 12.43. I don't even think there are Bailey Zappi. Oh, there are Bailey Zappi cards, but we have him projected for 9.56 fantasy points. All right, let me go and check our projections now for the defenses. If I just go to our showdown projections, what's the difference here? Projections. NFL single game projections. All right, let's see. What do we have for the defenses? We have the defenses for tonight projected for So we have the Steelers defense projected for 10.73 fantasy points. We have the Patriots defense for 7.68, and the QBs projected for 12.43 fantasy points, 9.56. I'm going to say no defenses is more contrarian, but it's funny that the question made me think. Like, I don't know whether people are more inclined to play the quarterbacks or the defenses on a showdown slate. This is as well as I've seen defenses project for us. I mean, we have the Steelers defense projected for like 1.2 more fantasy points than Bailey Zappi. We do have Trubisky projected a little bit better than the Steelers defense. It's tight, though. It's tight. And you are getting more correlation if you just play the defenses, right? Because you could play the same defense 4 times with just different defensive players. I don't usually recommend it, but it's a strategy I don't mind for tonight. Zeke is super expensive, by the way, which I guess makes sense because there are only so many Zeke cards that are out there. One thing that is kind of funny that you'll see about this is looking through the different players is that with Zeke being, that is true, Brandon saying max of 3 because you need from both teams. Yes, that is true. But you could still play one defense 3 times and the other one once. But either way, lots of correlation there. But the Zeke cards are relatively expensive compared to what you would expect a player like Zeke to be worth at this time of year because he's been a backup running back who's now all of a sudden in a prominent role because Ramondre Stevenson is hurt. Look at the core floor price, $11.95 for Zeke. That's way more than I want to pay for him. I don't want to pay that much for a Zeke Elliott card. And that's kind of why you'll see him not projecting really as a particularly good value. So hopefully he doesn't go out and have himself a big game because there are fairly limited prints on Zeke Elliott cards. If anybody has any other questions about Thursday Night Football, we can hit on that. But if you don't, let's look at the main slate because the main slate to me, a little bit more appealing than the Thursday Night Football game. And let's go to the top stacks tool, which, as you guys know, this is where I like to start a lot of my research here is by looking at the top stacks tool and trying to figure out which teams and which spots are projecting for the most overall fantasy points. We do have the Chiefs here projected with a 14.7% chance to be the highest scoring team on the slate. And then on the other side, the Buffalo Bills, 8.7%. So these are 2 of the 4 teams with the best projections. You could certainly make a case to do a game stack of Bills Chiefs. And then we've also got the 49ers projecting really well as the Chargers. But let's start by looking at the Chiefs. And I wonder if we're going to have, there's often a name matching issue that pops up with Patrick Mahomes. Because technically, I think he's tagged. Yeah. So in the back end, Patrick Mahomes is tagged as like Patrick Mahomes the second. And that does make it so that he doesn't show up sometimes. But either way, Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback, no issue with him other than the fact that he's a superstar. And if you guys know how I usually approach these, I don't like to burn a superstar spot on a quarterback. Now, one thing that is interesting, though, we very rarely talk about using a tight end in the wide receiver / tight end position, but Travis Kelce projects for 19.73 fantasy points this weekend. We have the Chiefs, once again, with a 14.7% chance to be the highest scoring team on the slate. So where does Travis Kelce stack up amongst all the wide receivers, tight ends? Because I think this is one of these spots where you actually could consider getting to him here. All right, wide receiver, tight end. We have Keenan Allen at 22.96. So amongst all wide receiver tight ends on the main slate, we've got Travis Kelce projected second best. I think he's somebody we're gonna want to play here. And also because he's tight end, I think that generally causes the players to get maybe a little bit overlooked here. So look at Kelce. We have a core floor price of $4 on Kelce with a 19.73 projection, but compare him to, say, like Stephon Diggs, who we've projected for 1.7 fantasy points less. His core floor price is $4.89. Now, is that a massive difference? 89 cents? Obviously not. But when you start to think about it from like a percentage standpoint, if you're somebody who's building, 10, 20 lineups, something along those lines, you want to buy these players on the secondary market. Stephon Diggs is, like 17, 18% more expensive than Travis Kelce when we have Kelce's fantasy point projection being higher. So I think Kelce, one of the only times this year I could really remember going out and saying that we should be playing a tight end in that wide receiver / tight end spot. It doesn't discount the other guys that we have as wide receiver options, but I think Kelce's a much stronger option as a tight end than we would typically see. And then one other thing too, before we change the page, is just look at the difference between him and just the other pass catchers here as well. There's only one guy on the entire slate with wide receiver / tight end eligibility that would project for north of 20 fantasy points in Keenan Allen. And we'll be touching on him a little bit in a second when we start to look at some of the top options from the Chiefs as well. We've got David Lynch asking, is CMC the optimal captain for the main slate? Yeah, let's look at all the captains. I'm going to say probably because of... Oh, do you mean superstar? Yeah, I got confused there for a second. So superstar. I'm going to assume yes because the wide receivers don't project massively well, but let's see. Oh, I have to change the positions. All right, let's look at all of them. Yeah, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey by a pretty wide margin. Look, we've got McCaffrey projected for 24.14 fantasy points at running back and as a superstar. The next highest projected superstars, it's Justin Herbert at QB, Lamar Jackson at QB, Josh Allen at QB. But there's going to be comparable QBs to those guys. The next best superstar, when we're talking about skill position players, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, project for 18 fantasy points, and Cooper Kupp at 16.47. The opportunity cost of playing a wide receiver at superstar, it means that you're actually playing a player with a lesser projection than the other players at the spot. Whereas Christian McCaffrey, that is not the case at all. Running back. If we look at all the running backs here. All right, running backs for the week. Christian McCaffrey projects for 24.14 fantasy points. The next best projection is on Zach Moss at 20.14. So you got Christian McCaffrey, the overall highest projected running back on the slate. Getting to the wide receivers. Wide receivers, the highest projected are Keenan Allen, Brandon Ayuk, and then you get to Amon-Ra St. Brown with a superstar status. But if you didn't want to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, your superstar, well, you play Stephon Diggs instead. And Stephon Diggs only projects for 0.16 fantasy points less, but he doesn't use the superstar spot. So if we just look at projections, yeah, I think you really have to think that the guy to go to in the superstar spot is going to be Christian McCaffrey. And then also, if we go and look at the quarterbacks, we'll see something similar, where quarterbacks, the highest projected quarterback also isn't a superstar. Brock Purdy project for 20.82 fantasy points. Kind of funny that we would talk about Brock Purdy now as the highest projected quarterback on an entire slate. You know, Brock Purdy's the betting favorite to win MVP this year. Who would have thought him as that kind of guy heading into the season? Yet here we are with a few weeks left to go. Brandon asking, and you could play Kelsey over both of them. Yeah, exactly. Kelsey, another guy who we talked about before with tight end / wide receiver. You could play him in that spot, and he also projects better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think Christian McCaffrey is absolutely the guy to play at the superstar spot. But it'll be interesting to see what it is that we want to do with the 49ers. We go and look at Brock Purdy, who's our highest projected quarterback of the week, and how that might potentially combine with Christian McCaffrey. Let's go and look at, I'm going to close this tab actually because I keep accidentally clicking on it like a donkey. Yeah, so let's look at the San Francisco 49ers. They have the second best overall top stack odds on the slate here. 12.8% chance the 49ers to be the highest scoring team. So let's go ahead and isolate San Francisco. And some of the players we've talked about are going to be here. Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy is the highest projected quarterback we have of the entire slate, not just amongst non-superstars, just period, full stop. Number one projected quarterback, Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey, the overall number one projected running back. And then we've got a pretty good projection here on Brandon Ayuk as well, who's fairly cheap. $2.80 is a core floor asking price for Brandon Ayuk, 18.67 fantasy points. I don't always love stacking a quarterback with the running back. There are some exceptions, though, and Christian McCaffrey is one of them. So let's go and look at Christian McCaffrey and his target share this year. How many targets are we getting in some of these games for Christian McCaffrey? And earlier in the year, if you remember, we were getting word that the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan said they were going to try to be cautious with Christian McCaffrey's workload. They didn't want to burn him out in the regular season. Yeah, well, that's really gone by the wayside because he has 210 carries and 62 targets this year. Massive workload for Christian McCaffrey, but he's played so well this year and he stayed healthy that I guess they've kind of felt like they should just keep forcing him the football. If you go ahead and look at the targets for McCaffrey in recent games, 4 last week against Philly. Oh, they did win that game in a blowout. The game before, 6 against Seattle. They also won that game in a blowout. 5 against Tampa Bay. They also won. Actually, the 49ers win all their recent games by blowout. That aside, Targets for Christian McCaffrey, 4, 6, 5, 10, 7 over the course of his last 5 games. This is definitely somebody you could stack with Brock Purdy, because if we're getting anywhere from 4 to 10 targets for McCaffrey, he's got potential for a massive game through the air, and I do think he's somebody who positively correlates with Brock Purdy. By the way, also 5 receiving touchdowns for Christian McCaffrey over the last couple of months. So this is a guy also who could end up catching a touchdown pass. He's going to be involved in the run game. He's going to be involved in the passing game. And I know that all these games we're talking about, these are blowouts that the 49ers are winning in. And despite that, there's still all this workload going to Christian McCaffrey in the passing game. What happens if the 49ers are actually trailing in the game? Like, do we see him get the Alvin Kamara 10, 11, 12 targets? That's a possibility. So Christian McCaffrey, I don't mind pairing him with Brock Purdy at all. Brock Purdy, low floor asking price here, $5.55. And something else, too, that I want to add about the 49ers here is that you're going to be getting them in all likelihood for a deep playoff run. And this is something we should be considering at this time of year, is that the cards that we buy, the cards that we get in packs are good for the entire season, not just the regular season, but the playoffs as well, all the way up through the Super Bowl. And players from teams like the 49ers are a little bit more of a premium for me, because we're going to be getting extra games out of them that we aren't going to be getting out of a team like the Chargers, right? So we're going to be talking about the Chargers here in a little bit, because they do have the third best top stack odds on the entire slate, but we're only getting a few more games out of the Chargers players, whereas we're getting much more games in all likelihood out of the 49ers. So Christian McCaffrey looks good, Brock Purdy looks good, and Brandon Ayuk projects as one of the top overall wide receivers on the slate. You can make that 3-man Seattle stack, double stack there with Brock Purdy, and I think that's pretty good looking on paper. And I do prefer Brandon Ayuk to Deebo Samuel. I know we've seen, well, we saw just last week, massive game from Deebo, but I think that Brandon Ayuk is the more consistent player we could count on in the passing game from Brock Purdy, because even last week where Deebo had the big game, how many targets did he have? 5 or something like that? It wasn't a ton, unless I just remember totally wrong. It was like every time that Deebo Samuel touched the ball went for like 50 yards and a touchdown. He was unstoppable against the Eagles last week. So there's certainly utility for Deebo Samuel, but I just don't like him quite as much as a stacking partner as Brandon Ayuk, because Deebo Samuel is somebody who, number one, doesn't really get a lot of volume. And then in addition to that, you could see big games for Deebo Samuel that involve him running the football out of the backfield, which I'm also fairly sure he had a rushing touchdown last week. And yes, he did. Yes, so last week we saw 3 carries for 22 yards and a touchdown for Deebo Samuel, and then 4 catches for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, but only 4 targets. And if you look at the games for Deebo, he did have one outlier game with 9 targets a couple of weeks ago. But beyond that, since September 21st, there's only been one game that we've seen Deebo Samuel get over 4 targets. So it makes him somebody who, if you have a Deebo Samuel card, obviously I like him as just somebody to throw into a flex option, but not my favorite stacking partner for Brock Purdy, because of the fact that you just get this chance that Deebo's scores might really not be correlated to Brock Purdy. Brandon also is asking, can we look over Monday night and Sunday night football at some point too? Yeah, for sure. We've got 10 minutes to go here, and we'll touch on those. And then he's also saying Purdy core cards are at a discount right now because the RPO packs have a bunch of chances to get him. Yeah, and I do expect they're probably going to come down even more as more of those get open from packs later on in the week. But, we're talking about like $5 for a core floor price right now. And for the highest projected quarterback we have of the entire slate without a superstar status, I like it, especially when, once again, not to hammer on the same point, but the playoffs being included in this as well. So let's go ahead and just quickly look at, actually, instead of looking at the Chargers, let's look at each position individually. And then we'll figure out who it is that overall we like the best at each spot per our projections, and then including stuff like the superstar status. So Brock Purdy, I think a pretty clear choice for me at QB, top projected QB, not a superstar, reasonable core floor price right around $5. And the other guys that are towards the top here, Justin Herbert, he's a superstar, not really interested in that. If you want to play an unstacked QB, Justin Fields, $2.99 to core floor price. We also have him projected for north of 20 fantasy points. So Justin Fields, I think, is an interesting one if you want to just play a naked, uncorrelated quarterback. Don't really have interest in Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes and Reignmakers this week because you have to burn that superstar spot. And then Russell Wilson, to me, also just a little bit too big of a drop off in terms of projection. So my number one overall favorite play at QB is going to be Brock Purdy and then Justin Fields second. Running backs. We know we like Christian McCaffrey. How about non-superstar running backs? Zach Moss is projecting really well. I know it was a little bit of a disappointment last week. He got, 7.7 DraftKings fantasy points, but I'm not going to write off Zach Moss because of that. He ended up having a massive workload against the Titans, and that to me is going to be more projectable than just did he score or not when they were on the 1 yard line. And it was like Michael Pittman caught one of those touchdowns. There was a tight end, a backup tight end that caught one. Zach Moss is going to get touches. He's going to end up scoring touchdowns. He was one of the leading rushers in the NFL prior to Jonathan Taylor getting hurt. So if you want to play a non-superstar running back, Zach Moss makes a whole bunch of sense, as does Josh Jacobs at 17.32 fantasy point projection and a core floor price of only $1.30. So for a very cheap option, I like Josh Jacobs if you're looking to bargain hunt. All right, wide receivers now. At wide receiver, the player we have, and actually I'm going to include the tight ends in here as well, since we've got Kelsey being relevant this week. So we look at the wide receivers. Keenan Allen, number one overall projected wide receiver / tight end for the week. $5.25 as a low core as the core floor price. Really getting myself tongue twisted here and looking like a moron. What can you do? 22.96 fantasy point projection on Keenan Allen. He is the overall top projected skill position player that we have on the slate who doesn't have superstar status. Travis Kelce, another great option here. And then Brandon Ayuk, third overall highest projected wide receiver / tight end. We have to play multiple of these guys in lineups, and he's going to correlate nicely with the Brock Purdy that we like at quarterback. So Brandon Ayuk makes sense there. Hard for me to really get behind Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's a superstar, but if you want to get to Stephon Diggs, he also makes sense, particularly in the same lineup as Travis Kelce. So you like that mini game stack going between the Chiefs and the Bills in there. So Diggs and Kelce, I do like them combined in the same lineup. Now let's go ahead and look at Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football per the question that Brandon asked. And I am going to throw myself out the window of my office if I click on the wrong tab again. I'm trying to remove the filters here, and I keep clicking on this Teams tab over and over again. Position filter I want to turn off. Reset. There we go. All right, so instead of the main, let's go ahead and look first at Sunday Night Football. What do we have this tagged as in here? Is it prime time? Yeah, prime time. Okay. Before Sunday Night Football, we have the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys, and only one superstar in this game because CeeDee Lamb lost his superstar status a few weeks ago. So Jalen Hurts, the only superstar to continue on with his superstar status, which means what? It means that Jalen Hurts is going to be very, very popular, and so is CeeDee Lamb. This game actually would have been like a little more fun from a strategy standpoint if both Lamb and Hurts were superstars still. We've got comparable projections on them, but now instead it's just too sensical to play Jalen Hurts and CeeDee Lamb in the same lineups. The optimal for the slate based on our projections, it is Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, and Jalen Hurts. Here's to me the best way to deviate off of that optimal projected lineup. It would be to go to AJ Brown, particularly if you're playing Jalen Hurts in that lineup as well, which I think you probably want to be doing. But I think something else we could do is play somebody different in the multiplier spot. Instead of playing Jalen Hurts or CeeDee Lamb, play like Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, or AJ Brown in the multiplier spot. And as long as you have one of those guys as captain, I do think you're going to have a little bit of a different looking lineup that's going to make yourself set apart from the field. Because what pretty much everybody's going to be doing is Hurts, Lamb, Prescott, either Pollard or AJ Brown. If we want to play somebody who I think is upside that's a little bit different here, Devontae Smith, we know he's big play upside. Haven't seen it as much from him this year, but definitely something that would be intriguing. DeAndre Swift, need more information whether he's going to play or not because he took a brutal hit at the end of the 49ers game, and I assume he's in concussion protocol still. Haven't seen any like real concrete updates on his status, but I would consider him certainly a little bit if he'd end up playing on Sunday Night Football. Let's go to Monday Night Football, and that will wrap up the show for us. If you guys haven't done it yet, do me a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the easiest way to support the content we have around here and to help keep it free. So we go ahead and we look at Monday Night Football. we've got some massive projections here on Monday. Oh, what's going on with all right, Monday Night Football? We have what's the big contest for Monday Night Football? All right, so Monday Night Football, we currently have in our projections multiple games showing up. Are they both? Okay, so they're both. I didn't realize they were both included for Monday. All right, so there isn't going to be the showdown contest for Monday. Yeah, I know, David, I know that there's the 2 Monday night games, but I wasn't sure if the contest posted to DraftKings were both games or if they're doing showdown contests for one or the other. But both of them are included, so we just break it down and look at everything here. I mean, pretty clearly with there's only 2 superstars amongst these teams, right? Yeah. So Barkley and Barkley and Tyreek Hill both have the superstar status. The gap in projections between these two it's massive. We have Tyreek Hill project for 26 fantasy points, Barkley at 16. So with that in mind, I think you have to go to Tyreek Hill. Oh, that's right. Mostert is a superstar now. But you can't consider Mostert anyway with Achane back now. Where do we even have Mostert projected? We have Mostert projected as the backup. We have Achane projected over Mostert for this week. I mean, you got a backup, somebody we've projected to be the backup running back is a superstar. Like total non-consideration of Mostert. Either way, basically no consideration for anybody other than Tyreek Hill as a superstar anyway. The pretty clear top stack is going to be Tua to Tyreek Hill. Look at the difference in fantasy projection between them and everybody else. And then also just the quarterbacks we have on the slate. The quarterbacks we have to choose from. Tua is projected for 22.54. I know that Jordan Love has played better as of late, but he doesn't project anywhere near as well as Tua does. So the quarterback you're going to want to play for the Monday night contests, that's going to be Tua by a mile. Other players that are projecting well for Monday as well, once we get past the obvious guys, Jalen Waddle. So if you want to go to a double stack here, Jalen Waddle is a core floor price of just $2.74. You can go Tua to Tyreek Hill and to Jalen Waddle. Some of the other running backs here. Brandon saying there is a Danny DeVito. Are we just Tommy DeVito's just become Danny DeVito now to everybody? There's a rare card, but no core card. I also don't want to play him over the other options. Like the Packers defense, it's not the best in the world, but it's not terrible either. But how can I reasonably say, oh, I want to play DeVito in a non-salary cap contest over Tua? Can't do it. AJ Dillon, especially considering Aaron Jones is currently not expected to play, assuming that remains the case, AJ Dillon, core floor price of 70 cents. We've been projected for 16 fantasy points. He's a pretty strong looking option. Such a big drop off. Everything projects terribly from the Giants. Let's pull the Giants up here. Look at these projections. We've got Barkley at 16.13, but he's got the superstar status. So we don't want to use him. Wan'Dale Robinson, 11.7. And then you got Darius Slayton at 4.89. You can't, there's 2 games, 4 teams to choose from. One of them was the Giants, and there's just nothing of relevance there. So Monday Night Football, not going to be a surprise. Build around the Dolphins. They project the best by a mile on that slate. So once again, guys, that is going to do it for me. We do this every Thursday afternoon. I'm always receptive to the chat. So anything you guys put in the chat, I read it. We answer the questions on the show. I'd like to engage with you guys that way. If you haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck with all your contests this week, whether it's in Reignmakers, Classic, NFL, MMA, whatever it might be. Enjoy it all. If you guys have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS. Peace out.